Hello everyone and welcome to this video which is in our Great Engine Game series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we are concluding our celebration, wild celebration of Leela-Zero's victory in the TCEC Swiss number 7 with a final game played against Caissa. I've been working this morning since about 6 o'clock. So what better way to relax than a sleepy Leela game where nothing seems to happen, or everything seems to happen very slowly, but somehow it just seems to lead to a winning position. Really nice positional game actually, with lots of little positional points and things that that look very natural, but when you think about them, they're not obvious at all. So let's have a look how all that went. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, a6, bishop a4, d6, castles g6. It looks like a vaguely respectable slow Ruy Lopez, really. It's just that this move g6 is a little bit too much somehow. Black really needs to get on with developing some pieces, breaking this pin. And that's what really gives the book its venom somehow. So after white plays d4, black is struggling a little bit. If e takes d4, we can already think of taking with the queen, and well, some pins are really starting to happen somehow. So b5 and then bishop b3, and I think that this was basically the book for the TCEC. I mean, the engines, the very strongest engines, they were doing something weird here, just giving up a pawn and trying to struggle and hold on in an endgame. Actually, Caissa played a much more natural move, and to be honest, I think the move that almost 100% of humans would play, which is the move bishop b7. What does bishop b7 do? Well, it protects the knight on c6, so anticipating any unpleasant bishop d5 moves, and also connects the rook to the queen. So if ever white goes d takes c5 and swap off queens, you can take off with the rook rather than having to do something unpleasant like take with the king. So this is a very, very natural continuation. It's really interesting then to see how the game continues. So d takes c5 played by Leela, which surprised me actually. You sort of, I don't know. I mean, d takes c5 always feels like a little bit of a weak player's move somehow. You've established your centre, you keep it, right? But well, there's a few little things that are awkward in black's position. And the first one actually is the weakness of the f7 pawn, and obviously opening up the centre makes sure that this bishop is keeping the line open to attack the f7 pawn. You particularly notice that after the move knight takes c5, when the engines want to play the move bishop g5, which is a nice little one. Rather irritating attack here. And if black tries to play the obvious takes and queen g5, which is actually the move that both Stockfish and Torch thought was the best in this position, then we just go queen f7 and queen f8 and actually end up picking up a pawn. So I mean, black isn't actually as bad as it looks, because you go king d7, the king's still safe, and there's some attacks and all that. But it's still obviously going to be pretty good for white. So Caissa took with the d pawn on e5, and then no queen exchange, but queen e2. And I mean, what is black's big problem here? Well, there's several. First of all, one very big problem, and we're going to see that a lot in the game, is the fact is this d5 square. Black's got a knight on c6 in front of the c pawn, and that's not a good way of doing it. I mean, if you just think back to the Ruy Lopez, the main lines, there's the Breyer variation where black plays a knight to c6. And then afterwards ends up playing knight b8 d7. It's a nice closed central position just to redeploy the knight and be able to play the move c6 to cover the d5 square. in this position, well, black just doesn't have the time for that with an open centre. And that means that white is going to get an absolutely lovely square on d5 for the knight. And, from d5, the knight's attacking the c7 pawn. It's also attacking e7 and f6. It's a very, very cramping piece for black. There's another big problem. It's the weakness of the f7 pawn. I'm going to stop drawing arrows now. The bishop on b3 and the knight on g5 can join in and attack f7. That's pretty unpleasant. And also black's, behind in development in this position. So, okay, the queenside piece have developed, but yeah, the kingside's still got to be developed. And, well, that's very crucial for defending the f7 pawn, for example. And, white's got the possibility for further tempo gains with bishop g5 or rook d1. So, that's really nasty. And the other thing is that, often say this, it's one of those pieces of general wisdom that I've gathered over the years. But when the opponent's pawn's pieces are close to you, it's easy to attack them. And well, that's definitely the case with this b pawn, which is exposed, and we can attack it with a4. And yeah, black doesn't really have any great way of dealing with that. Every choice that black makes is going to cause some extra weaknesses. So you've got a lot of potential difficulties, and you don't really see the way that black is actually going to be able to deal with all of them. And yeah, it actually adds up to a really serious advantage. Probably in the hands of a Leela or a Stockfish, it's probably even a winning advantage already. It's amazing, but I'm tending to think that somehow. So rook d1 attacking the queen c8, and now this move a4. Yeah, we're just attacking this pawn on b5, and we're just asking black, what are you going to do about it? Now, it's really interesting that all of the engines just play knight f6. They just leave that pawn hanging there. And the question is, is it actually, is white not able to take it, or is it just being given away? And it's a good question to ask, because in the game, Leela just ignores it completely, has multiple opportunities to take that pawn, but just plays the move knight c3 and later bishop g5, as you'll see. So, I mean, I was kind of intrigued because I couldn't actually see why you wouldn't take it. And, well, I mean, actually, there is no good reason in some way. You can take it, take, queen takes. Now, you could play queen takes b5. And after castles, you'll go knight d2. I mean, you're going to be a pawn up there. Yeah, Torch, was looking at here, and then knight takes b5. And you're just going to be a pawn up as well. So why on earth wouldn't Leela do that? Well, the point is that, Leela felt that its position was so strong positionally that taking this pawn actually is insufficient. It's not sufficient a reward for the overwhelming positional advantage that Leela feels it already has. And that is a really amazing bit of judgment, actually. Because, I mean, in general, in this position, Torch was taking the pawn and sort of winning, making 75% against Stockfish, But I think that when for example you made Torch play knight c3, then I think the percentage that Torch was making against Stockfish was much higher. Well, how high can you get? Like 90%, 95%, and yeah, so it does seem actually to be the case, and it's a really significant thing because I know that if I had a student and he played knight c3. He or she played knight c3, I'd be saying, yeah, but why didn't you take the pawn? And if my student said, oh, I wasn't sure somehow, I'd say, oh, come on, just a pawn up here, why wouldn't you do this? And I wouldn't really think that it shows, incredible positional judgment not to take it. But yeah, it kind of doesn't. I mean, if you see what's happening here, black gets a pin. Queen b8, so the d4 square is slightly weak there, so white has to spend a little bit of time here. Black's coming knight h5 into f4, so you're forced this. Black's getting this, you're getting c6, the bishop on b3 is a little bit weak. Then you start seeing what Torch did against Stockfish in order to keep things together, some fancy work there. I mean, Torch did it, of course, bishop a7 takes, but there was some counterplay there, and this knight is a bit weak, and you've got some threats here. You start to realize somehow that, yeah, this wasn't actually as easy, as it seemed. Whereas, as you'll see in the game, the way that Leela played was total control. But these are such difficult judgments for human players. I mean, absolutely, the position that Leela got in the game, definitely a position where if I got it with white, I would say, yeah, I'm in control there. Definitely a good clear advantage. But for Leela, it's like plus 2, plus 3 already, and I don't think I'd ever have the confidence to think like that. So yeah, it's tough, but I thought that was a really amazing judgment, that this pawn that's hanging is completely takeable. That's no problems at all. You can do it if you like. That Leela's just saying, no. Positional advantage is way better. Well, you'll see how it went. So castles, bishop g5. Another very interesting move there. You could take on b5 again, no problem. b4 now. Caissa Caissa basically thinks now, well, okay, I can't play good improving moves much longer. At some stage, it really is going to be possible to take this pawn, and I'll have absolutely nothing for it. So now I've got to do something. Plays b4. And now Leela plays bishop f6. I mean, that's also kind of the amazing thing, right? Instead of just taking a pawn, you're actually giving black the bishop pair. But again, Leela's judgment here is that these black bishops are, really just completely passive. They're not going to be able to do anything at all. So bishop f6, bishop takes f6. B takes c3 is possible as well. But it's a very similar judgment as well. The engine's just thinking, this is very, very passive for black. This piece is passive. This pawn is weak. You're going to have to do some stuff like f6, for example, to defend it. But then, your second rank is weak. Your e6 square is weak. And white's got all sorts of ways of creeping forward on the position, and black finds it incredibly difficult to deal with that. Again, I understand how good this is, but thinking, oh, I could have had a pawn. I don't know. Yeah, it's I think as a human player, you'd play this position with white with complete confidence if you were just given it. But playing it knowing that you could have just been a pawn up a few moves ago is pretty tough. It's I don't know whether I'll ever be able to unlearn those reactions of mine, because here as well, Leela plays the move c3. Again, what I always say, I've said it already this video, if your opponent's pieces are close to you, easy to attack them. And what Leela does here is make sure that Leela can open up the b file just very, very easily. One move and it's done. But of course, you'll think again, I could have been a pawn up, and now I've given away the bishop pair, and I've also given myself an isolated pawn on c3. It feels weird, right? Because it's not like you haven't taken the pawn and but you're picking up masses of obvious positional advantages. No, the positional advantages that you've got are not at all visible really to the naked eye, or not easily. These bishops are passive. This knight is an absolute monster. For example, this knight can't move at all. This queen is pinned to the c7 pawn. Now you're going to get an open b file. You'll be able to attack that bishop. It's going to stretch black even further. More things that you have to keep hold of. Yeah, I mean, potential. I mean, you've got potential to start advancing on the king side now as well, because what can black do? Black's got so little room, so little freedom. But these are not obvious positional advantages. Just looking at it, on the board, you're saying, yeah, I've got a weak pawn on c3. Black's got the two bishops, How good is this? I mean, I understand I've got a lot of space, and I've got a good solid grip on the center. But yeah, that's maybe plus 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, getting towards that. And the engines are plus 2.5, plus 3. It's incredible. It's really, but I sort of think that if of course, what's what's happened to me is that I've grown up with a completely different set of evaluation parameters, and I'm still struggling to adjust to it. I think if you grew up with engines and you saw how they assess these things, probably it'd be easier for you to have the same assessment. It's why I think that the younger generation that's growing up with engine evaluations is bound to be way stronger than us, simply because they should be learning to evaluate stuff right and at the right level from the first moment. So what can black do here? Well, Caissa comes up with a little bit of a way, trying to bring this knight round d8 to e6. That's a pretty decent idea. Maybe aim for f4, maybe aim for c5, and maybe eventually, sometime, you can't do it immediately because of knight b6, you'll be able to play c6. But what Leela does now is really nice. Leela sort of says, oh, okay, this bishop is maybe thinking of getting active, right? Might even exchange itself for the knight. Let me do something. So knight g4, queen g4, and now bishop d5. So, as soon as Leela thinks that a black piece is going to get a sniff of being active, Leela plays to exchange it and trying to leave black with the most passive pieces it has. So bishop c6, knight c6. And of course, the thing about exchanging off this bishop, especially with a queen now away from the light squares, b7 might become an invasion point. You get c4, maybe into c6 if this knight moves away. You've got to actually given yourself a lot of light squares that you could attack. So, Caissa's getting a little bit worried. I mean, if you start playing moves like knight e6, then this queen might start getting into a bit of difficulty as well. So Caissa goes back to c8 just to cover some squares and try and get the knight out to e6. So what do you do? Well, Leela just starts playing the move h4. Very nice somehow. The queen moves away. You start gaining some space on the king side there. And what are you aiming for? Are you aiming for h5? Maybe. Maybe you're going to play g3, king g2 first. As the another book that I'm always quoting, How to Find the Best Move in Any Position by a rather mad genius, you could say, called Shashin. Do have a look at his game against Korchnoi, Shashin Korchnoi, around 1970. Quite amazing. We came up with a great book, all full of all sorts of incredible concepts. Rather odd book. Some people really don't like it, but I got quite enthusiastic. And one of his concepts was that you had to play that Capablanca elevated his position, which is basically to say that Capablanca got a space advantage and then just basically moved his pieces up the board a couple of ranks until the opponent's pieces had no more space on the board. And one of the things that Shashin said that Capablanca did was play g3, king g2, move the pieces up one rank like that. And of course, when you do that, you're also freeing the h-file so that you can play h5, h6. Also put that into Silicon Road to Chess Improvements, in Chess for Life as well. So a5 played by Caissa. So I mean, getting a pawn off the light square, so it's no longer attacked. But on the other hand, now some more light squares are weak. I mean, it's one of those things, right, that whatever you do in these positions, every choice has a downside. I mean, I think to defend well as a human player, you've got to, just be a little bit sanguine about it and just say, I'm going to take some decisions, and if it's good or bad, there's nothing much I can do with it. I'm just going to make some decisions and go for some sort of setup. I'm not going to worry too much about, I'm weakening this now. Yeah, every choice that you have in such a position has some downsides. Queen c4, very nice move from Leela, just connecting with weak light squares and also attacking a pawn on c7. So knight e6 played by Caissa, and now a very nice move indeed. What's black's most active minor piece? It's the e6 knight, because this guy is doing absolutely nothing. So what does Leela do? Try and exchange it, of course. The move knight g5. Really nice. So this h-pawn wasn't at all about playing h5 to h6, it turns out, or not very much. It's about playing knight g5 and exchanging off black's last active minor piece and leaving only the passive one on g7. I mean, it's just been, this has really been a real masterclass from Leela in, not taking the pawn. So not spending any time getting an extra pawn but letting black's pieces stay active, but just exchanging it. Bishop g5 takes f6. Bishop c4 to d5, swapping off the light squared bishop, and now knight g5, swapping off the knight, and basically you're just going to leave a good knight against a useless bishop there, blocked in by this pawn, and unable to defend, the weak pawns on the queen side. I mean, as a chess player, I loved. I think, one of my strengths and also one of my weaknesses was that I loved very clear games. I mean, games with a theme that, sort of flowed from beginning to end. But that was also, kind of a weakness because, very often games simply aren't like that. It's you've got things happen, things change, you have to adjust and be flexible. And it's only against, often much weaker players that you can really get such a flowing, game where, there's one idea and it seems to flow all the way through. And that's what's so amazing about a lot of Leela's games is that, it's playing a 3500 rated engine. And yet it's implementing, basically one key idea, which is simply from move 7 onwards, exchange off all black's active minor pieces, leave it with a passive minor piece, win on the flank that that passive minor piece can't defend. And that's the whole essence of the game from beginning to end. And it's really amazing. It's just got not enough words to say how incredible it is to be able to do that against this strength of opponent, So knight g5 hg, queen g4, and now knight e3, queen takes g5. So black's actually won a pawn there. And again, this is very typical. We mentioned it in Silicon Road to Chess Improvement. The rook's pawns are used a lot to do all sorts of things, but Leela especially is completely happy often just to say, okay, I've used the rook's pawn, you take it. It's not an important pawn. It's on the side. I lose it. Doesn't really affect my position at all. I'm going to focus on advantages on the other side of the board. And that's this move, rook d7. And now, I mean, all sorts of things potentially are happening. We're attacking f7. We're attacking c7. We could even triple up on the 7th rank. And you look at black's position, it's just looking so passive. What can you do there? Rook c8 played, and now a really interesting moment as well. I mean, I was just thinking, well, obviously what you want to do in this position is to play the move rook f7. Why is that? Well, you want to wreck the opponent's pawn structure, right? I mean, if you take on c7, you're getting rid of a pawn. You've lost a pawn. You're getting, so black gets rid of a weak pawn. That's not that much of a gain, right? Surely I'd want to take on f7, and then, I'm wrecking the black pawn structure, giving him 3 isolated pawns there. In actual fact, I'm quite happy that both Torch and Stockfish only wanted rook takes f7 in my games. But Leela played rook takes c7, and but what's the idea? Well, actually, it's incredibly thematic. It's what I've been saying, that Leela's saying, this bishop, passive, unable to defend the left flank. So let's start nibbling away at that left flank. Let's get a pass pawn rolling, because this bishop is not going to be able to defend that very well. If the centre was open, of course the bishop could defend it, but the centre's closed, so it's not going to happen. But it's a very interesting moment, because I don't think I would ever play that move, rook takes c7. I mean, of course you notice it, but you sort of say, no, rook f7, that's definitely the grandmasterly way to play. It's quite, again, quite strange. So queen d8, rook b7. Again, this is the move of a very good player always. You always try and exchange on your terms. I think often weaker players, when an exchange is offered, they sort of take it, and they sort of give the opponent extra moves. Whereas you play a move like rook b7 after queen c7, rook c7, the exchange has taken place, but your rook's already on the 7th. I mean, you only make those exchanges when you're absolutely ready for them. And so this is a very nice, just a little moment there. Now that Leela's ready, Leela plays it. So I was wondering about rook takes f7, but there is this move rook c8, attacking this pawn on c3. And it's a little bit awkward, because if c4, you go bishop h6. And I sort of thought, oh, well, maybe White's actually surviving. The bizarre thing is that Torch actually drew against Stockfish in this line. I'll just show you what Torch did. King h2, rook a7. Torch picked up the pawn. The bishop got a little bit active, and somehow Stockfish managed to survive here just by holding, waiting, and doing its Stockfishy thing. Stockfish managed to win this somehow. But how did Stockfish manage? By not taking that pawn on that A pawn and going for a kingside attack. Actually quite incredible. Playing the move G5, G4, G5, and the knight coming into D5, and now threatening knight F6 and rook A8. So obviously Torch manages to avoid immediate mate, and then Stockfish just goes for winning pawns and then targeting this bishop and pushing this G pawn. I mean, it's really amazing, right? I mean, I'm looking at this A pawn and thinking, is this really possible? But this is just, of course, absolutely beautifully calculated. Torch gives back the pawn. It's now 2 against 2, but now the white king is coming in, and this is really, really active and difficult. And Torch didn't manage to hold this with black. Because white's got lots of ideas. You can get the rook in there. You can start bringing the knight in there. The king comes across to f5. In the long run, the c5 pawn isn't holdable. But I mean, that was just an absolutely a quite amazing thing, actually. The way that to actually you can actually win this is not to take that pawn, be a pawn up, and an outside pass pawn on the side of the board, but instead play for an attack on the king, giving away that extra pass pawn, even the possibility of having a pass pawn in order to launch an attack on the king side. I thought that was an amazing concept from Stockfish. Again, I'd never think of it. But Leela didn't go for any of that. Leela just played the move rook c7. And Leela's idea simply is very thematic. Let's just move that c pawn all the way up the board. And I mean, the key thing is that, if the rook moves away, tries to get behind the pawn, then, white can play the knight to d5, and that pawn is going to be protected all the way up to c7. That's the power of how Leela set things up there. So rook d2 played, c4, bishop f8, c5, in we go, king g7, c6, bishop c5. Okay, well, you've managed to get the bishop a bit active, but you've got a pawn on here already. And now Leela plays this very nice move, rook d7. And the idea is if you do something like bishop e3, trying to get behind the pawn, we just take that off and go c7, end of story. So rook takes d7 takes, and bishop e7. So, at first sight, you might even think, my goodness, has this d pawn gone too far? Is this really, has white messed up here somehow? But Leela's calculated it beautifully. So knight c4, king f6, knight takes a5, king e6, and knight c6. We're threatening d8. Black's got to take that one off. We go knight takes e5. Check, it's not finished yet. Forking these two. And after king e6, we play the move knight c4. And this is an absolutely beautiful setup because we've got this knight on c4, pawn on e4, pawn on a4. And all of these squares are covered. So the black king cannot get at all close to the white knight or to the white a pawn, which is going to give white lots and lots of time to bring the king in wherever he wants and support the passed pawn or invade on the king side. But it's a really precise sequence there, but just ending in a lovely little structure there. So Caissa just sort of brought its piece in there, and then Leela did another very specific thing here: a5 and then e5. And Leela again looking to transform its advantages now. That passed a pawn. I mean, the passed a pawn, you've got a knight against a bishop. The bishop's going to be able to deal with it. But what you can do, you can actually just still use it as a decoy and then start hitting on the black king side. Now, I was wondering about playing f5 here, just trying to keep some pawns on the board, but Leela wasn't impressed at all here. King e2, king d5, king d3, king c6, knight d6. We can just start, the knight can invade here because you can't take off like that. We just come to d4, and then whilst the king is dealing with the pawn, we're just going to come and take the pawns here. So this knight is just going to be able to come after these pawns. Knight f7 to h8 is already going to be a way of coming in for it, and then you're just going to be completely winning here. So Caissa played the move f takes e5, knight takes e5, king e2, and knight g6. And the key point is this black king is so far away, you're not going to be able to stop the white king from winning this pawn, either by itself or with a knight. Caissa didn't even try to stop that. King takes h5, and Caissa resigned. I mean, we're just going to, we're going to bring the king in, we're going to start pushing the pawns, and it's just going to be a complete win. And you end the game quite appropriately with a minor piece ending, where the knight that Leela has been trying to get against this this black bishop for the whole game is shown to be the superior piece. I thought that was a quite amazing game. I mean, it's not spectacular or anything, but there are some points where, I say, wow, this is kind of going above what I'd be capable of in a practical game. Because, not taking the pawn, I'd just be looking at winning that pawn. I'd be thinking, but there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it. There's no huge counterplay for black. I am just a pawn up once I do that. And it's true. But of course, once you do that, I guess what you're saying is, your pieces are kind of a bit distracted. They're not focusing on the really big strengths of the position, which is the, your control of the d5 square, the fact that these knight and bishop are in each other's way, the fact that this bishop is passive. You're not really focusing on that. You've just taken the pawn. Your pieces are a bit distracted, and black's just got a bit more time to try and organize something. A pawn down, exactly, but yeah, with maybe okay pieces. And black, the fact that you can play bishop a6, pin that knight, maybe force white to play the move c4 when, these are a bit weak. There's a little weak square on d4. That just gives black some hope. Whereas, this grip that Leela exists by not taking the pawn and then exchanging off a minor piece that was black's good one, and then just leaving this knight in complete control. Another entrenched piece on d5, impossible for black to get rid of. It's very impressive. And then when Caissa finally says, oh, maybe I can play bishop takes d5, Leela says, no. We'll exchange off the bishop, and now you can't get rid of my knight anymore. It's really quite beautiful. And after this again, Leela just completes that whole process of draining the activity from white's position, because there, what have you got? You've exchanged off the active knight, and all you've got is this bishop. And why is this bishop bad compared to the knight? All due to the pawn on e5 that Leela created with this exchange d takes e5 on move 7, on move 8, which surprised me, okay? That's why the bishop is passive, and that's why this bishop can't deal with anything that's going to happen on the queen side, not without a lot of moves of redeployment. And yeah, I mean, that is exactly what Leela went for the whole game. Made it all about pushing that c pawn as fast as possible, and then going for that remote a pawn. The bishop again not able to defend in time, and this was a very nice piece of judgment from Leela. Just the passed a pawn, but those pawns are always going to be weak. Black's going to have to keep some sort of eye on that passed a pawn, use its king a little bit to do that, and that just gives white time to attack the kingside pawns with a knight, and then later with the king. I mean, I think you can really, learn a lot from this game. Really have it as a model for yourself about, positional play and what you should aim for, and also, as a sort of to strengthen your conviction when during a game you think, yeah, I think, that taking that pawn, I can't see anything wrong with it, but I think, black's just going to be a bit more active somehow. Maybe I should just keep a grip. Well, this sort of game can sort of strengthen your conviction of, yes, I've seen a great example of doing that. That's what I'm going to do. Certainly it works that way with me. If I feel like I'm playing and imitating someone else, that often gives me courage to do stuff that I wouldn't think if I was just thinking, oh, this is my genius. It's all me thinking I can do that. I'd probably be wrong, won't it? So a really, really cool game, and very symptomatic, very typical actually of how Leela played throughout the Swiss, which was incredibly controlled, and just controlling these high book exit openings from beginning to end, but in a really beautiful way like this. So I hope you've enjoyed those games. I mean, I think every one of Leela's wins was really worth playing through. So very impressive. So there we are. Going to go on to something fresh. Going to take me probably a little bit of time to get things ready, but I've got a big series ready and waiting, ready to come out. So there, yeah, hope you've enjoyed this. I'll be keeping a little eye out on the cup as well for any more nice games. Would be nice to get some games from other engines as well. And otherwise, thanks very much for watching. Do give a like and subscribe if you're enjoying it. And, well, hope to see you for the next videos. Thanks for watching.